Chapter 3. Honey. That's what started the whole thing. It's what awakened Melody Bishop in the middle of the night, and what she was still thinking about the next morning when she got up. Maybe she had misheard, she told herself. After all, she had been half asleep. Or maybe she had dreamed it, but deep down, Melody knew she hadn't been dreaming, and she was certain about what she had heard. Honey. It had been a week since she and her father had run into Nancy Montgomery in the grocery store. Her father had continued to behave strangely and deny there was anything unusual going on. As a result, Melody had kept her eyes and ears open, and eventually it had paid off. After making her bed and tucking her pajamas under the pillow, she got dressed and went downstairs. Her grandfather's oxygen tank was sitting in the hallway, the long, thin plastic tube coiled up on the floor beside it, hissing like a snake. Melody had completely forgotten that he was coming to stay for the weekend. She pushed open the screen door and stepped out onto the front porch. "In case anyone's interested, I'm awake," she hollered across the yard. The garage door was open and the scuffed toes of her grandfather's leather slippers were sticking out. "Be there in a sec," Grandpa hollered. "I'm just looking for the hammer." That was what Grandpa always said when he got caught smoking in the garage. Even after he had been diagnosed with emphysema, he had refused to give up his precious Pall Malls. When he thought no one was paying attention, he would unhook himself from his oxygen tank and sneak out for a smoke. Melody went back inside, where she found a note on the kitchen table scribbled on the back of a yellow flyer announcing the grand opening of a new beauty salon in town. She ran her fingers through her short brown hair. She had never set foot in a beauty salon. Her grandmother had always trimmed Melody's hair for her when she was little, and after Grandma had passed away, Melody had learned to do it herself, angling the mirror on the medicine cabinet door in order to be able to see the back of her head. "Have a great weekend and take good care of Grandpa," her father had written in his familiar chicken scratch. "In case of emergency, call this number." Melody sincerely hoped there wouldn't be any reason to call the number, since it was impossible to tell her father's 8s from his 4s or his 2s from his 3s. He had signed the note his usual way, XO times infinity, Dad. Melody set the note aside and poured herself a glass of milk. There was a box of assorted donuts sitting on the table. She chose one dusted with powdered sugar, broke it in half, and was just about to dip it in the milk when the screen door squeaked open and Melody heard her grandfather shuffle in. "I'm in the kitchen," she called out to him. A minute later, Melody's grandfather was wrapping his arms around her in a big bear hug. The oxygen tube was back in place under his nose, tethering him to the cylindrical tank, which sat on a little cart beside him. Melody held her breath as she returned her grandfather's hug. She loved him dearly, but hated the smell of the cigarette smoke that clung to his clothes and hair. "Did you see the note from your father?" he asked. "He should have been a doctor with that handwriting of his." "Do all doctors have bad handwriting?" Melody responded, dunking the tail end of her donut in the milk. "Mine's got hairy arms," said Grandpa. "In case you don't mind, that's not a sequester." Melody told him, "Hairy arms have nothing to do with handwriting, and give me a break, Grandpa. Do you really think I don't know what looking for the hammer is a euphemism for smoking out in the garage?" Grandpa laughed and pinched her cheek. "Somebody's full of beans this morning," he said. "Any particular reason?" As a matter of fact, there was. "Have you noticed Dad's been acting kind of discombobulated lately?" Melody asked. "Henry's always been a little forgetful, even as a boy, but come to think of it, this morning when I got here, I noticed that his socks didn't match," said Grandpa, rubbing his chin. "That's nothing," Melody told him. "Yesterday I opened the freezer and found a copy of the Red Badge of Courage sitting on top of a box of frozen waffles." "In the freezer?" Dad tried to laugh it off, but he's been acting strange for weeks, staring off into space, whistling the same song, and he burns everything he cooks now, too. "That reminds me, I made us a tuna noodle casserole for dinner," said Grandpa. Melody tried not to let her disappointment show. Her grandfather was a terrible cook. She had been planning to ask if they could order pizza for dinner. The phone rang and Grandpa reached to answer it. "It's Nick," he said, handing her the receiver a moment later. "I'll give you two some privacy while I go out to the garage to look for..." "Oh, who am I kidding? You're right, it is a euphemism." He started to leave, then paused and put a hand on Melody's shoulder. "Don't worry about your dad, Melly," he said. "He always gets this way at the end of the school year. Once he turns in his final grades, I'm sure he'll be back to his old self again." What Grandpa didn't understand was that Melody wasn't worried. She was excited. In fact, she was overjoyed. As she watched her grandfather head off to the garage, Melody thought back to the previous spring and the spring before that. It was true that her father tended to get a little distracted at the end of the school year, but this was different. For the past few weeks, she had gotten the distinct impression he was hiding something from her. She was pretty sure now she knew what it was. When she heard a tiny, familiar voice calling her name, Melody realized she had completely forgotten about Nick. "Bishop!" He was shouting into the phone. "Bishop, are you there?" "I'm here," said Melody, "and you'll never guess what's happened. I'll give you a hint. It's about my dad." Nick Wu and Melody Bishop had been best friends since they'd been in daycare together. People sometimes teased them about being boyfriend and girlfriend, but it wasn't like that at all. Don't tell me you found another book in the freezer, Nick said. No, said Melody, but last night in the middle of the night the phone rang and woke me up. I heard my dad talking to someone, and then I asked who had called, and he told me it was a wrong number. What's so strange about that? Nick asked. We get wrong numbers all the time at my house. This wasn't a wrong number, said Melody. My dad definitely knows who she is. She? How do you know it was a woman? Because right before my dad hung up, I heard him call her something. What was it? Asked Nick. Honey, Nick gasped. No wonder your dad's been acting so strange, he said. You know what this means, don't you? Melody knew. Even though he had never said it, Melody could tell her father's heart had been broken when her mother passed away. For years, Melody had been making the same wish on every birthday candle, eyelash, wishbone, and shooting star that came her way, and now it had finally come true. My dad's got a girlfriend, she said. Who is she? Asked Nick. That's what Melody wanted to know, too.